Let's begin with prayer. We thank you, Father, for this day. We thank you for each breath that you give to us. May we use all of them to serve you, to obey you, to praise your holy name, to love you with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. Pray that you would be with us this morning. Cleanse our hearts, our hands by the blood of your Son, that the worship we offer might be acceptable to you. Pray that you would guide us once again as we consider the Hebrew language, the text of your word, your Old Testament. Pray that you would help me in the teaching of it and with your people in the learning of it, that it might be used for the further study of your word, that we might know all the more and all the more better the truths you have revealed therein. We pray all these things in Christ's name and for his glory. Amen. Okay, so today we're going to be doing syllabification and pronunciation, phonology, vocalization, however you want to phrase it. This is part 2. We did part 1 last week. It wasn't intended to be 2 parts, but sometimes I'm not sure how long these lessons are going to take, so I'm just pacing myself here as best I can. So on the sheet you have is a little practice sheet for you. We'll go over that in detail later. It's just a sheet of Hebrew words that we'll practice breaking up into different syllables, because the pronunciation is important. Syllabification is important. It seems so long ago, most of you, I'm sure, you learned English syllabification. Well, let's quickly review what we've covered so far. We've covered our alphabet. We've got our letters down. We got the vowels. We've seen some that are sublinear. The holum that is written above the Hebrew consonants. We have the shurek written in the midst of the Hebrew consonants. We looked at our dagesh. We considered the 2 types of dagesh: dagesh line, dagesh forte. Dagesh line being the dagesh that appears in begad kafat letters that are not preceded by a short vowel, and then the dagesh forte, which in the begad kafat letter indicates doubling of that letter. In a non-begad kafat letter, it means double. That letter is doubled as well. That's going to be important for syllabification. We're going to look a little bit at some words on the page you got to emphasize some of that. So we've also covered the Shavah. We looked at the Shavah last week, and the Shavah appears all the time in Hebrew. If you're looking on your page, your handout that you got this morning, you can see on some of the words there's a number of them that have Shavah. So how the Shavah functions is very important in Hebrew syllabification and pronunciation. We considered the 2 different types of Shavahs. There was the silent Shavah that follows a short vowel, a Hebrew vowel, and indicates the closure of that syllable. And last time, towards the end, I could not find my notes. Well, this time I come with things highlighted, underlined, circled. So hopefully this will be a little less convoluted than last time was. The Shavah and syllabification, a silent Shavah follows a short vowel. I just mentioned that a little while ago. So we had our 2 words that we considered. I'll go ahead and do one here. We had Jerusalem, the Hebrew name for Jerusalem, or the Hebrew spelling, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a transliteration. And we had the Hebrew word for Egypt, Mitzrayim. So, in the case of Mitzrayim, we have a silent shavah underneath. What letter is this? Anybody remember what letter that is? Sadeh. Very good. We have the silent shavah underneath the sadeh. So the first syllable is mitz, and it closes. And the shavah receives no pronunciation. It closes that syllable. Word. And the shavah is a vocalized, spiritized, mobile shavah. There's several different names for it. Basically, it just means a shavah that receives pronunciation. All those terms indicate the same thing. So we have the first syllable, Yerushalayim. And the point I was going to make last time, and it's another hard and fast rule for the shavah, is you can always close a syllable after a shavah. So if you have a shavah that's preceded by a short vowel, that still closes a syllable. In the case of Mitzrayim, we have Mitzrayim. And the shavah is a stop, it's a silent shavah, and it closes that syllable out. But in the case of Yerushalayim, that's a spiritized shavah. It receives that short E pronunciation, Yerushalayim. And so that shavah, like the silent shavah, also closes the syllable, so that we divide our syllables out. You have your syllabification there with the shavah. The shavah always indicates the closure of a syllable. We'll go ahead and write that on the board for you. You can copy that down. That's a good syllable. I spelled syllable wrong. Sometimes I think I know more Hebrew than I do English. Syllable. There we go. So, a shavah always indicates closure of a syllable. So, there's two examples of that. And then in part 2 of syllabification and pronunciation, we're also going to tie up some loose ends. And at the end of the lesson today, if we have time, and so far we're on track, we're going to go over some vocabulary words. And in addition to the words on your handout, and we'll start building a vocabulary. My goal is to have roughly 5 to 10 words at the closure of each lecture that you can start to build your vocabulary with. Before we get there, though, I want to tie up do some miscellaneous things in this part 2 of syllabification. Yes.
Where you've got the Jerusalem syllabicated, will you tell me which one? Do it by section there, because it's not making sense to me.
Do it by section.
By your syllables.
Yerushalayim. Very good. I forgot. I put an extra line in here. My mom still teaches me. I'm not in homeschool anymore, but my mom is still teaching me things all the time. There you go. Yerushalayim. Very good. Thank you, Mommy. Okay, so, all right, can I go to erase it now? Very good. Okay. Very good. All right, so we're going to look at next Hataf vowels. Now, A hataf vowel, you already know all the Hebrew vowels. A hataf vowel is just a vowel that is paired with a shavah underneath a Hebrew consonant. Don't get scared. It's nothing complicated. Remember, toward the beginning of the class, we were discussing that the guttural letters sometimes do interesting things to the vowels and other consonants in the immediate vicinity therein. So, what are the guttural letters? Anybody, give me a guttural letter. Het is one. What's another? Ayin, Aleph, and Hey. Exactly. So we have our 4 guttural letters. And hataf vowels are frequently appearing under guttural letters. Now, what are the hataf vowels? Well, there's only 3. Let's see. There's a couple different ways to spell it as I was reviewing. All right, hataf. Depending on which textbook you pick up, some spell it, and they have their little circles and things above, but for our intents and purposes, we will bypass those. Hataf vowels. So, a hataf vowel, like I mentioned earlier, is a vowel that has a shavah coupled with it underneath Hebrew consonant. Again, we'll use ayin or aleph just for illustrative purposes. We have a patak, the comets, only the A class, and then segol of the E class. The hataf, and the names are very simple. They have the hataf patak, the hataf comets, and the hataf segol. Like I said, you already know the vowels. Now we're just putting a shavah right there up against the Hebrew vowels. Now, the thing with hataf vowels, there's no change in pronunciation to a hataf vowel, fortunately. What is the significance of a hataf vowel? And the hataf vowel, the purpose of the hataf vowels, as Moshe Greenberg gives in his Introduction to Hebrew, page 22, illustration 2.9, says that the purpose of the hatafs is chiefly to facilitate the articulation of the laryngals. Now, if that was too much for you, it's just an aid in laryngal pronunciation, which there's only one laryngal that really, well, 2. Aleph and ayin are silent. The hey receives a slight, just a little airy H sound. The het receives that guttural, got to get some phlegm mustered up kind of H sound. So, 2 different H's, but it's chiefly to facilitate the gutturals. A very common illustration of this, a very popular word in the Hebrew Bible. Let's see if you recognize it. I know all or most of you know this word. Anybody want to take a stab at pronouncing that word? Elohim. It's the a name of God in the Old Testament. Many of our names for God that we get, we had a Names of God Sunday school class a long time ago. I think it was just us and the littles here. We had names of God. The Old Testament is chock full of names for God. We have Adonai, we have Elohim, we have Yahweh, and then there's El, and then the El is coupled with a number of different things. El Rohi, Lord my shepherd, El Shaddai, El Nisi, Jehovah my banner, so on and so forth. But Elohim is the probably the most popular name for God in the Old Testament. That should be an easy statistic to look up, but I didn't think about doing it till now. But that's Elohim. We can see we have the Hataf Segol underneath the Aleph, but it's still a sound. Elohim. Elohim, name for God. That's correct, yes. Just one E. Just one E. Yeah, the Hataf Shavah does not receive a transliteration at all. They're not transliterated into English. Just the vowel next to the Shavah is translated. Good point, Ethan. So, just 2 A-class vowels and 1 E-class vowel for the Hataf. Again, when you're cruising through your Hebrew Bible, which I hope to get you to that point, where you're reading through your Hebrew Bible, no bumps in the road. Of course, even I stop and look stuff up because there are some rare words. We're going to try to cover some, much as possible in our vocabulary. But when you're running through your Hebrew Old Testament text, you're going to run into these guys a lot. And it looks like there's a lot going on. Just look for the vowel. They're almost always going to appear under gutturals. Though they can appear under other letters, it's very rare. Most of the time gutturals, most of the time Aleph and Ayin. We did, earlier we looked at Jacob's name, I think. Jacob's name is a good example of the Hataf vowel facilitating the pronunciation of laryngeal. Here's Jacob's name. My yud is taken off there. We have Yah Akov, which you get our English Jacob. There's no J in the Hebrew alphabet, and yet we have a lot of Hebrew names that take the J. Normally indicates there's a yud there in the Hebrew. Yaakov. So we have here the first syllable, Yah, the yud with the patak, Ya'ah. We run into a laryngeal next, or a guttural. Well, to help with the pronunciation, because we have 2 A-class vowels here, they put a hataf patak underneath the ayin so that it's Yah, and the Shavah kind of says, whoa, slow down, we got a guttural here, Ya'ah Kov. Kind of gives you a little pause in there, so it's just not Yaakov. Some kind of massive wall of A sound there. Yaakov. Gives you a breather, lets you know that there's a syllable it's ending there, because as we looked at before, Shavah indicates the closure of a syllable. We had that. Well, there's the Shavah aiding in the pronunciation of the laryngeal that shows itself in the middle of Jacob's name. Most of the time you see an al, and it's going to be, or an aleph, it's going to be at the beginning of a word, as in the case of Elohim. But you are going to run into some in the middle of a word. And we get to verbs, you're going to have gutturals that are going to be the middle letter of a verb. And that's really going to affect some of the shifting and conjugating of the vowels within the verbal system. So, there are our Hataf vowels. So let's see, we covered that. Covered our Shavahs. Okay, one more thing about the Shavahs. I want to point it out. As I go over this stuff, I'm having to return to the roots, which is good. I need a refresher. Sometimes I'm going too fast, I think, and I'm overlooking some things that to me, seem obvious, but I want to make sure that you guys grasp them so you're not left behind or confused. And I know I'm not the best teacher, so I can be confusing, as Mommy illustrated just a few minutes ago with my syllabification illustration up here. So I want to cover one more thing about the Shavah, because the Shavah it's not a vowel, it's not a consonant, it's not really a punctuation mark, but it's important because of its frequency in the Old Testament. So one thing I want to cover, I think this relates to a question Ethan asked a week or two ago, is, let's see here, get my word I want to use for my illustration. And if Ethan didn't ask this question, I'm sorry, Ethan, it's just my faulty memory. I want to say you asked something in way of this. If not, I'm still going to use it for an illustration here. About the Shavah, what do you do when you have two Shavahs back to back in a word? We have here the word mishpateh. We have first syllable mish, which ends with that Shavah, and then we have a Begad Kafat letter with the Dagesh in it. That means it receives its regular pronunciation. It's a Dagesh. Which kind of Dagesh is it? Line, exactly, because there's no vowel preceding this Begad Kafat letter. So we have mish, receives that slurred E sound, mishpah te. We have our tet with the sere and then a yud wrapping things up. This is a construct state ending. We'll get to that here in a couple of lessons. What do you do when you have two Shavahs? Well, my pronunciation of the word might have showed what's going on here a little bit. The first Shavah closes that syllable. And it is a silent Shavah because it's preceded by a short vowel, the hirek. But the next Shavah receives pronunciation because it's not preceded by a vowel. A Shavah is preceded by another Shavah, which is not a vowel, therefore it receives pronunciation. Does that make sense, or is that clear as mud? If you remember that a Shavah is silent following a short vowel, and if a Shavah is not preceded by a vowel or receives pronunciation, even in the case of Shavahs in pairs, which there's one tense in the imperfect that's going to have two Shavahs next to each other, as this word does, you should be okay. A Shavah preceded by a short vowel is a silent Shavah. You've got a short vowel, silent Shavah, but even if you come up with even if another Shavah follows that one, it receives pronunciation because the Shavah is not a vowel, so it receives a pronunciation in the absence of a preceding vowel. So I just wanted to point that out, and maybe I hope I haven't confused you too much. The word is mishpateh. It comes from the Hebrew word mishpat, which is a judgment, an ordinance, a declaration. But as we're going to learn later about the construct state is indicated by a sere yud ending, and that pulls the comments down to just a shavah, the vowel shifting. So it becomes mishpateh, which means judgment of, ordinance of, and you would follow it of mishpateh, ordinance of Jacob, we'll say. That would be a Hebrew sentence. The judgment of Jacob. he judged it best to keep silent when he heard his daughter had been defiled. So, he judged it right to put the sticks in front of the sheep when he fed them. But the Hebrew construct state's pretty common too, but maybe that was more of an answer than you wanted, Mr. Jones. I'm not sure. Try to give you the most bang for your buck around here. But so that closes out the back-to-back Shavahs. I just wanted to throw that in there. And now we're going to get to the Dagesh Forte and syllabification. 2 words I just want to look at with the Dagesh Forte. For your handout, if you didn't get one, I'll try to find you after the lesson and get you a handout. The Dagesh Forte and syllabification. We'll look at 2 words here, just to give you an example. Okay, so we have 2 words on the board. First word. Anyone want to take a stab at pronouncing this one? You have a silent letter with the A vowel, ah. And you have a tav, T sound, ah, ta. Ata. Very simple word. Ata means very simple English word, now. At last. Usually now. Behold, now I will act. Ata, if you'll notice, has a Dagesh in the tav there. And when we're breaking down syllables of a word, at, ta, that Dagesh there is a Dagesh Forte or Line? That's a Begad-Kafat. But what do we have here preceding it? We have a short vowel. So it's a Dagesh Forte. Dagesh Forte. So how we would transliterate and syllabify this English word, or this word in English, I can write the other way. At, ta. You see, there are 2 T's because the Dagesh doubles it. And so at, the tet is used in the first syllable. The Dagesh doubles the T. So you have A, T, T, A, H for your transliteration into English. Pronunciation, at, ta. You see how that Dagesh provides you 2 tavs in the pronunciation of that word. Does that make sense? Okay. That's how the Dagesh Forte works with syllabification. Now, another example of the Dagesh Forte. Anybody want to take a stab at pronouncing this word? Did I write it too small? If I was sitting where Caroline was, this would probably be too small. Okay. We have another guttural. Hookah? Is that what you said? Hookah? That's correct if that's what you said. I was listening for hookah, so. Hookah, it sounds like a funny word. It's in Hebrew, it's not referring to that weird pipe thing. It's referring to a statute. A law is the idea behind hookah. Again, we have a Dagesh in the middle of our cough. So we would write out hookah similarly to ata. That's a Dagesh Forte, because cough is not a Begad-Kafat letter, so we know it can't be Line, must be Dagesh Forte. It's preceded by a short vowel too is another indicator. So hookah, we would transliterate hukka. You want to be really precise with your Hebrew pronunciation. We don't usually put two Q's back to back in a English word. Q's normally followed by U. In other cases, or in other rare cases, you have some other vowels, but normally it's a Q. But hukka. So it shows you there too that in most Hebrew, nouns and verbs are three letters. When you start conjugating the verbs, you're going to gain some more. But that shows you that the Dagesh Forte provides two of that letter to aid in pronunciation. So they're not just putting dots and stuff because it looks cool. They like to tattoo their letters. They're putting it there to help you in pronunciation with the word. So that covers Dagesh Forte. Walking back and forth. Working hard. I want cameramen to work hard too. So bouncing all around this board. So we also want to cover sure, Dagesh Forte. A Dagesh Forte appears in, if a letter is not Begad Kafat and has a Dagesh, it's a Dagesh Forte. If a Dagesh appears in a Begad Kafat letter and it's preceded by a short vowel, it's also Dagesh Forte. But if it's at the beginning of a word, if we have a Dagesh in a Begad Kafat letter at the beginning of a word, it's Dagesh Line. Make sense? Kind of? Okay. Try to simplify that slightly. The Begad Kafat letters are the only ones that can take a Dagesh Line and a Dagesh Forte. So how do we distinguish from those two which has Line and Forte? With Begad Kafat letters, a Line is not preceded by a vowel. Forte is. And then all other letters that are not the Begad Kafat letters, if they have a Dagesh, it's a Dagesh Forte. And gutturals cannot take a Dagesh in any case. There's only one exception that I know of. I was told that, and then we learned the pronominal suffixes, which we'll get to several lessons in the future. There is one, the third feminine singular pronominal suffix does put a Dagesh in the hay. But that's the only one that I know of, and when you see it, you're going to know, oh, that's referring to her or something, because it's the third feminine pronominal suffix. So it sticks out like a sore thumb. But for those three rules will guide you with all the Dageshes. One final thing I want to cover is that some words are two consonants and a full vowel and are monosyllabic. If you take your handout sheet, and I'll write it up here on the board if you didn't get one, number 8 on that sheet is the word hake. It's monosyllabic. Monosyllabic. Hake. It has the long vowel, the sere with the yud. Sometimes you'll see these vowels followed by yud, no vowel underneath. It's pronounced the same, with the exception of the hirik yud, receives the shorter I sound, as in machine. But hake, we have one 3-letter word, you have 3 consonants, monosyllabic, one vowel, the sere, yud. So I wanted to point that out, that there are some words that have 3 letters, because I think I said last week, maybe an error, maybe I just dreamed I said it in fear of trying not to, that consonants can only have, that syllables can only have 2 consonants. There are some words. Another is sus, the Hebrew word for horse. 3 letters, 1 vowel, your shurek, 1 syllable. So there are some monosyllabic 3 consonant words. Now, if you want to get really technical, some people would say, well, the shurek's a vowel, not a consonant. Some people would argue that and say The Shurek is a consonant too. It's a vav. I don't really have a horse in that race. If you want to think of the Shurek as a vav, that's fine. I personally don't. So now we're going to get into, with our last few minutes, we're going to do some vocabulary. Jump right into vocabulary. I liked learning the vocabulary in Hebrew because vocabulary, the stuff we're learning now is rules for the game. The vocabulary to me was gameplay itself. Now I've actually got something I can apply these rules to. I've got something I can do something with all these rules I'm learning. Now I can actually apply them to something. So we're going to learn some vocabulary words real quick. You've seen me do this one before. Anybody want to try pronouncing that one? Adam, exactly. Transliterated is the name Adam. The Hebrew word means man or mankind. The first man, his name meant man in Hebrew. Pretty easy to remember. And the word has presented in some cases, difficulty in, y'all can write down if you want to. It has presented translators some difficulty. Whether do we translate it Adam, do we translate it man? Hosea 6:7 being the classic example. But like in some translations, man, they transgressed the covenant. But like Adam, they transgressed the covenant. Some people believe God didn't make a covenant with Adam. I personally do believe God made a covenant with Adam. If you'd like a theological discussion on that, come find me afterwards. But there's Adam, man or mankind. Perhaps I should write the translation underneath. Next, we have I want to take a stab at pronouncing that one. You have two segols. Eretz. Aleph is silent. Retz. Two syllables. Eretz. That means earth, land, or ground. Eretz. And then, how do you spell it? Aleph, Segol, Resh, Segol, final form Sade. Transliterate it. Let's see. Try that. Eretz. Probably some Hebrew professor cringing somewhere. But Eretz. For hard and fast pronunciation, there you go. So Eretz. Earth, land, or ground. In the beginning, the Eretz was without form and void. All right, here you go. Here's a good one. I know, it seems like most of the words are starting off with Aleph here. All right, real simple. Somebody please pronounce that one for me. Close. Av. Av. That's a bet, but it has no dagish in it, which means it receives V pronunciation. Av. I think, well, that's a really simple word, but it's a very important word. Because it means Father. Av. Now to be fair, I'll tell you, I'll go ahead and throw in mother. Av is word 4 in the vocabulary. I think mother is like 176. I think that's a bunch of politically incorrect stuff going on there. Aim is the word for mother. If you want to go ahead and put mother down, we'll go ahead and give you both at the same time so nobody can accuse us of any political this one? Aim. Like ready, aim, fire. And then Av for father. And then you saw Elohim earlier. Another name for God that was mentioned is just simply El. Not like the beverage, El. Aleph, Sarai, Lamed, and that means God. And that's important to note because El always refers to God, the triune God, the only true God. Elohim can sometimes be, because it's a plural in the Hebrew, we'll explain that later when we get to plural endings. Elohim can sometimes be used to refer to false gods because it's a plural. So Elohim is not always synonymous with the triune one true God. It can sometimes be used to refer to false gods, imagined deities, so on and so forth. So, El is that one. We'll do one more, and then we'll look at the sheet, and then we should be time to wrap up. All right, somebody want to pronounce that one for me? We have a Begad, Bain. It's exactly right, Bain. We have a Bet, which is a Begad Kafat letter. It's got the Dagish. So as we saw with Av, it had no Dagish, received the V pronunciation. Here it's got the Dagish, so it's pronounced full B, Sarai, Bain. Final form, none. That's another important word because it means son. Exactly. Son. And sometimes child, sometimes children. When we look at plurals, I'll show you the plural form of that. For now, Bain, son. There's going to be a phrase that comes up a lot, so you sons of Israel. Or some translations render it children of Israel. Just like man is sometimes used generically to refer to humans, people, son is used generically to refer to offspring, posterity. But there you go. Now for the handout that you got. If you didn't get one, again, I have plenty up here. The handout is for you to practice syllabification. Go ahead and hand some of these out. Some of you that weren't here earlier. If you take a look at your sheet, you have on here 14 words, and some of them we looked at. You want another one, brother? There you go. Justin, you probably already have this in some form or another, but there you go. So we have on that sheet 14 words for you to practice syllabification on. You've got some Begad Kafat letters, gutturals. You've got the Hataf vowels that we covered today. You've got Shavaz all over the place, so that's for you to practice syllabification on. You don't have if you want to fill it out and bring it back to me, I'll be happy to check it. If you don't want to do that, that's fine. That's just for you to play with. Yes. The arrow, yes, that is a device that the Masoretes inserted into the Hebrew text. That's like this little arrow-looking thing, like that.
Is it for stressing the pronunciation?
It's a good question, brother. I don't remember. It may be, Justin might be pointing something out there. It might have to do with pronunciation. I can't remember. If it has to do with flow of pronunciation, I have to look that up about the little arrow. And it's still the same. So that's for you to play with, enjoy. Any more questions before we close it up? All right, let's go ahead and close in prayer. People, recognize your word, worship your Son. We thank you for making yourself known in the Holy Scriptures, for revealing your glory to us. For unless you had done so, we would have no knowledge of the holy. We would not know how to worship, for your mercy and your grace to us, for preserving your word. We thank you for the opportunity to come here to preach. Pray that you write it on our hearts, that you would be with your servants as they stand and declare your word to your people, that you, Pastor, beside still waters, we pray all for the glory of your own great name.